So we are back with part 3 of lesson 5. We set up our database on MongoDB. We've added Mongoose to our project, and we've now created a models folder and defined at least temporary current initial schema. That's the word I was looking for. Initial schema in JSON format, and we've exported it so that our controller can see it. Just go back here and put my password back in. So I'm going to launch my project again, make sure I'm still connected to the database, and make sure that we can load the project. So on our project's index, I want to put in a link here to add a new project, and then we can build a simple form and then try to save to the database what we want to do. So let's go to our views, projects, and index. And let's just add a simple link on here. So this is going to go to projects/add. So let's just add this, just a static link, nothing fancy here. So in our views projects index, let's just add line 2. And this is going to call the path /project/add. I just forgot to get my glass of water. Be right back. I filled it up. I forgot to bring it back with me. So now if I refresh our projects, we get this link here. And when we click it, probably to be expected, we get a 404 not found at the URL /projects/add. We're going to need to do 2 things to fix this 404. What do we do to prevent this? Yep, we're going to add a view. That's right, Maggie. And what else do we need to do? Right, we need to add, so we need to create a view under views projects. And in our projects controller, just close up some of these other files. In our projects controller, we need to add a get handler for that path. So we're going to do both of those things. Let's make the view first. So under views and projects, let's make a new file that we'll call add. Whoops, sorry, I want to call it add.hbs. So we're going to use handlebars templating. Whoops. I need to rename it because it should be add.hbs. So it's just going to be a blank file. We could put an H1 here. This is project details. We'll build out the form in a minute. For now, we'll just put a heading on. So I've created under views and projects. We had index.hbs from last week. We now have add.hbs, which just has a simple heading on it for now. We'll flesh this out a bit more next. So that's one of our 2 steps, create the view. But this is only half the job. If I go here right now, we still get a not found because our Node app doesn't know how to interpret this URL, doesn't know what to do with it. So we've got to manually point this URL to load our new view. So we're going to go to our controllers, our projects.js, and we're going to add a get handler at projects/add. So I'll just put in a comment, kind of by convention. So we'll do router.get at /add. So when we have a request at /add. Now, how come we only need /add here? How come I don't need the projects in front of it? The path only has to be /add. Right, because we're already in the projects controller. Right, that mapping we set up last week in app.js. Right, we've already mapped any requests that start with /projects to use our projects controller. So the /project is already assumed that's the first part of the URL. So then in here, we've got our usual express parameters of request, response, and next. So what do we need to do in order to display our new view that we've created called add? Right, thank you, Maggie. We just call res.render. You got it, Nick. Res.render. Inside of the views projects folder, we want to render the view called add. I'm also going to want to, because our layout template, it looks for a page title, right? When we did here, it puts a title in. Let's pass a title variable. Title, we'll just say project details. So this should fix our 404 error. When we have a GET request at /project/add, display the new view that we've created. So right now it's just going to display our heading and our H1 tag, basically. Let's try that out. Now when I go back here, go to projects, add a new project, it now loads our view. Pretty simple. So really, so far, we haven't done anything we didn't do last week. We added, for example, in our index, we added the about view, and we added a get handler for /about in the root. So now we can go to projects and we can add. This page, we can flesh out this form. It's going to be pretty basic for now, but we can go ahead and we're just using basic HTML with a little bootstrap formatting to build out our form. I'll just do it quickly and I can share it on Pastebin. So we'll create a form, the method of post. We don't actually need the action tag. In Express, all our forms, they're going to post to themselves because we have both a get handler. We'll just add a router.post at the same URL to process the form submission. So in here, we'll just create a few field sets. So if we look in our model, we've got our fields are name, due date, course, and status. We probably don't need this. Actually, what we can do for the status, we'll come back to that in just a second. When we're adding a new project, we can actually just default the status. So maybe here, I'll go back to my model for a minute. Under the status, we'll set the default value as to do. So we don't actually need to include this field on our form. This will just be the default. When we add a new project, it's always going to be to do in a to-do status. But we need name, due date, and course. And we'll just set this as required. I'll create two other field sets. So this will be due date. I'll also use type equals date here. And our last column, for today, we'll just leave it as an input, a regular text input. We may change this to a drop-down list next week. But just to keep it simple, let's just work with a single collection for today. So the course, due date, and name are all required. And lastly, we'll add a button. Let's say offset 3, BTN primary. I'll just check out the form. I can put this code up on Pastebin. There's really nothing magic here, just standard HTML with a bit of Bootstrap. But it's important, the important thing to note is the input names, they match exactly the property names in our Mongoose schema. So it was the same way in ASP.NET. That way we don't have to manually map each input to a particular property of the model. They're mapped automatically based on the name. And same way, Barak, you were kind of asking, where do we specify the table names? We don't. It's mapped automatically based on the model names. So I'll just refresh and see what this looks like. Yeah, that's probably okay for now. I'll put the form up on Pastebin. I will put the link in the chat and give you a minute if you want that to grab that HTML. So just a simple form. So now our form loads. Our HTML5 validation fires, which is nice. Pick date. That, Ivan, is a good question. So view the page source. And check your style sheet links. And check them compared to the other pages. It works on your main project page. Think I know the issue. If your style sheet isn't loading, Ivan, if you go to the layout, so views and layout, the CSS path should start with a slash. So go back to the public root. Because remember, in our index and about views, those are in the root of views, but the project views are in a subfolder. So yeah, you need that leading slash, because when we use the express generator, you'll notice here, one of the things the generator does is it defines the static path as public, right? And that's where we find our public, our static assets, images, JavaScripts, and style sheets. So in your layout, whenever we want to include a link to a style sheet, JavaScript, media file, we need to use that leading slash. That takes us into the public root. Right, so that's why. Easy fix. So I can fill out my form. Right? So why do we get a not found here when we submit the form? Going to the same URL, yet we get a not found. How come? Right, because we have a get handler at this URL, so it can load our form, but we don't have a post handler. That's right, Maggie. So we need both. Just like in a .NET controller, we had a get handler and a post handler for the same route, same URL. It's the same in Node. We need a get. We've got the get. We can load the form, but there is no post. So let's add a post handler, and this is going to allow us to save. So this time it's going to be a post at /projects/add. Now, we've built our project model, but so far we haven't used it. We want to use our model here to save the form data to MongoDB. So in order to do this, we need to add a reference to the project model. Actually, how do I want to do this? Bear with me. Right. Actually, we need two things. First, we need Mongoose. Actually, I wonder if we need Mongoose. I'm going to leave this out for a second. Not sure if we need this, because we're using our model, and our model uses Mongoose. So I'm not sure we need Mongoose in the controller. I'm going to try it without. So we're going to refer to our model as capital T project. So we're going to go up one directory. Sorry, it's up two directories. Models. So we're going to link to our project model. I don't think we should have to reference Mongoose directly. I have sometimes in the past, but we're going to see if we can if this will work without it. I'm not sure the controller needs direct access to Mongoose, because the controller uses the model and the model uses Mongoose. That should be good enough. So in this instance, we're using our router's post method. So here's what happens when we have a GET request at /project/add. We're going to render this view. When we have a post, our three parameters callback parameters, which should be getting familiar, request, response, and next. So in this case, we want to use the project model to save the form data to MongoDB. So I've got this variable here called project. This represents our model. So we don't need a SQL command. We don't need like an insert into. We can just call project dot this method. There's a create method that's built into Mongoose. Because our model is a Mongoose schema, it recognizes when I type project dot, the create method gets recognized. So we want to create a new document. And I think I misspoke earlier. We do need to map our fields. So we'll say the name is equal to our request.body.name. Our due date is equal to request.body.duedate. And our course is equal to request.body.course. So we're reading the fields from our form and we're populating each property of the model. We don't need to populate the status because we're defaulting the status as to do. So we want to use Mongoose and use our model to try to create a new document in MongoDB in the projects collection. And then what we want to do is we want to evaluate. One of two things is going to happen. We're going to get back one of two things. We're either going to get an error back, or we're going to get a new project document coming back from Mongoose. So in here, in our callback, we're going to get back either an error or a new project. Don't worry, I will put all the code on here, on paste it. And then we can check and evaluate, what did we get back? Did we get an error or did we get a new document back? So if we got an error, let's maybe just log it out for now. If we didn't get an error, what should we do? What should the user see if the save operation is successful? We have a couple of options. What could we do after saving new data? Yeah, we could show them a message saying it's submitted. What would our other option be? Yeah, we could redirect them back here. I mean, there's no code yet, but this page, we're going to write a query. It's going to function like our .NET index where it's going to query and list all the projects. So we could just take them back here and then they'll see that it got added. If successful, redirect to projects index. So we can call response.redirect to /projects. So this will then call the index, which will then render the view. We don't want to render the view directly because eventually we're going to need code that queries the database first before it can load the index view. So we're better off to call this method first. .NET was the exact same way. We redirected to a new action. So here's the method. I'll put it up on paste bin and we can try it. So here's our link. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to submit my form now. And then we can use Compass to inspect our database. If this shows up, there's a refresh button here. We can look using Compass inside the database. So I'm going to add a project and save, and we'll see what happens. Okay, well, we didn't get an error. We did get redirected. There's no error. And you can actually see it shows you the URLs. So it shows that I posted the project's ad. There's no error logged out, which is good. If I go back to Compass and now refresh, I've now got one document here. My status is to do, and it took all the values I entered, and it also gives me a unique ID. It lets me export. Compass is kind of neat. We can export this. We can view it as JSON. We can view it in a table if we want. And here's just kind of the standard view. I guess I like the JSON view. I'll maybe add one or two more projects, and then we can just write the code on our index method and view so that we can then display the projects in our app, and then we'll stop for today. So I'll add one more project maybe. So assignment 3, which will be due March 15th, and that's in COMP2106. So now when I save and refresh my data, I now have a couple of assignments here. Okay, so Justin, somewhere in your code, you must have the word project tracker in camel case. You'll need to remove that and make sure you spell it in lowercase. It could be in your connection string. So follow what it's telling you. The error message is providing you some guidance as to what to look for. Okay, so Hung, you submitted the form. Was there an error in the console when you submitted your form? So submit again and check your console. If something goes wrong, if the create doesn't work and there's an error caught, it should get logged. You also need to click the refresh button in Compass in order to see the data. It won't appear right away. You've got to refresh. Okay, so there's no error, but when you refresh, okay, Barak, that's good. And Hung, are you looking at the projects collection? Does it show you that your collection is called projects? So if I go back to the database, it says, I have a collection called projects. And when I click on it, I'm not sure why this isn't refreshing. Interesting. So Hung, when you submit the form, you get redirected back here. There's no error in the console and no data in MongoDB, and you are looking at the projects collection.
Yes, so there's no data in the collection. And I don't have any error.
Interesting. Hung, you may have to share your code on GitHub so I can have a look at it.
Yes.
Okay, it probably isn't going to work if you name it. If you want to manage it, you'll have to do it through Compass. The other thing you can do is delete the collection and recreate it. So the naming conventions are really important. Okay, Hung, when I say the console, I mean your node console. The errors are not printed to the browser console. Sorry, I wasn't clear yet. You've got to look here. So when you post it, if there's an error, it should show us. So scroll, okay, click save and go back to node. Okay, so there is no error message. Let's scroll up in your code and let's look at your, I want to look at the post method in the controller.
Well, I just copied this from yours. So
Okay, well, this looks pretty good. And let's look at Compass. Click the refresh button on the right. There's a refresh button over on the right side. You need to click that. Okay, go back to your code editor. And let's scroll up in the terminal. Okay, so it says you're connected. That's good. Let's open up your config globals file. Okay, so the issue is the database name. At the end, your database name is called test.
oh,
You have to change that to match the name of the database you created. That's why. So you're connected to MongoDB, but it's not using the name of the database you created. So it says test at the end. You have to replace that.
yes, thank you.
Simple fix. So the last thing, it's an actual database. It's there by default. So you need to replace that with your own database name. So we just quickly want to add a query to the index method and build a simple table here. So after we add a project, rather than having to check in Compass for our data, we can actually see it right here. So in our controller, I'm going to go up to my project's index, use project model to fetch all projects for display. So we'll call project.find. And when we call project.find, we're either going to get an error or we will get a list of projects. If we get an error, we will just log it out. Otherwise, we want to move this res.render statement into the else. So in this case, we got data back. And the data is called projects. So how do we pass this variable, this list of documents? We can see it's an array of type document. How would we pass this to the view? Yeah, Barak, the HBS file's here. So we need to pass this value to the HBS. So when we run the query, if there's no error, it will give us back a list of project documents. We then need to hand or pass this to the view. So how would we do that? We're, yeah, in the options, Justin's right. So, we're already passing a title. So we can also pass the data. So I'll just maybe put this on a new line. So our projects so load the index view, set the title, and pass the query result set as projects. So when our query runs, if we get an error, we'll just print it in the log. If we don't get an error, we're going to get back a bunch of documents from our MongoDB collection. And then we're going to pass those documents to our view, to our HBS file. We are almost done. Our last step is to build a simple table on the index view so we can loop through and render each project. So we want to add an HTML table here, and we'll use a loop with HBS syntax. So we're going to use our model to run a find command. There's no parameter, so this is going to get all the documents in the projects collection. Will give us back an error or a list of documents. If we get an error, we're just going to display it in the console. If there's no errors, we're going to load the project's index view, give it a title, and pass along the data so that the view can render it. Again, this is really similar to how the index methods worked in ASP.NET. Run a query, pass the data when we're loading the view. Can actually take out Mongoose here. We don't need it. So then we can open up our projects index, and we'll just build a simple table. We'll add a simple header row. And then we can use some handlebars, some HBS tags to generate the rows. So we use a number sign each, and we're going to loop through our projects variable. This is similar to a for each loop that we've used in .NET and we've used in PHP. Right? We're passing a variable called projects, so we can loop through it. So for each one, we just use this to refer to the current element. This dot name, this dot due date in the second column, and our third column will be the course. And we also want to show the status here. When we're looking at the projects, we want to see what projects do we have to do, what projects are in progress, which projects are done. So I'll add that last column. So our table code, it's pretty clean. We've used the handlebars or the mustache tags around any server side, any dynamic values. We'll just see if I did this right. So now when we refresh, we get simple table. If I want to add one more project, when I save, it gets added. We can deal with the date formatting later. Okay, so we've got half of a CRUD application working now using our MongoDB and Mongoose. We can add and we can list. I'm not sure what you mean, Justin. So where we want to go with this next week is we'll want to be able to delete, we'll want to be able to edit, we'll maybe format our dates. We probably don't need this long format. And maybe we'll also look at adding a drop-down list so we could add the courses separately. And then when we're adding a project, we can just choose a course as opposed to letting users enter anything they want for the course code. We can control it by using a dynamic drop-down list. That's just the browser browser history remembering form inputs. Yes. So we're going to keep working with this next week in terms of doing edit, delete, and then cleaning up and adding some more functionality using MongoDB and CRUD. Right? So I can refresh. And I can even manipulate my data through here. So if you want to change something or delete documents, you can actually do it directly through MongoDB if you like. Yeah, I will upload all of my code. I'm just going to remove my password. Yeah, I'm going to put it all on GitHub right now. So we can create and read. Okay, so it's all uploaded to GitHub now. Does anybody have questions for today? Reminder that your portfolio assignments are due next Wednesday at 5. And we'll work more with this next week. I will upload the videos as soon as they are done processing. Okay, everybody, then I will stop the recording